I hereby pronounce Egg Bowl recruiting dead. Cause of death, NIL. We'll tell you what we're talking about. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Subscribe there. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Big commitment over the weekend. We talked about Austin Simmons, and we kind of drilled down on that. It was an excellent recruiting weekend for Ole Miss football. And the last one that we haven't talked about until now is the commitment of Travaris Banks. And this is a good safety. This is a physical alley runner in the vein of Otis Reese, and we're going to show you some highlights in the second segment, so stick around for that. But this is a need for Ole Miss football. If you remember a couple of weeks back, my everydayers will absolutely be able to attest to this. I talked about how the safety position was most concerning on that defense, and that Ole Miss is having to recruit cornerbacks in order to find players that are slot safeties and free safeties in that position because of their versatility. Ole Miss now has a 3-deep at cornerback, but safety-wise, they're still lacking. That's one of the reasons I was so excited about the official visit and recruitment of Andy Jaffe, which I still think that could happen potentially, but a really good player that is a type player that you're going to look up in 3 or 4 years, and he's an all-conference safety at Wake Forest if he doesn't go to Ole Miss. It is that type of player. Whenever you look at him, you're like, well, he's just a low 3-star. Well, watch his HUDL video. Watch his HUDL video. You can see what I see. But he is a true free safety prospect. Put him in that vein of playing free safety, playing center field. He can absolutely do the job. Now, Traveris Banks is in the same vein, a little bit higher rated. He is a 4-star on 3 sites and a 3-star on 1. Here's his profile. You know, he's 124 in the country on Rivals, 123 on ESPN, 184 on 3, and he's a 3-star player on 24/7. He's 6 foot 1.5. Let's say 6'2" by the time he gets to college, because kids aren't through growing until they're 21 or 22 anyway. He's from Hillcrest High School in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And his story is an interesting one. We're going to get into the whole death of the Egg Bowl recruiting rivalry in the third segment, because right now they have a problem. They genuinely have a problem at the moment, NIL-wise. We're going to get into that. And they're going to have to raise money and do what they can to do it. But half of their stick is the fact that we're not the rich school. And people that lean into that don't really have the money and the resources to give out in that situation. This is a bad situation. I think Mississippi State, if they're not careful, could become Vanderbilt without the degree. And that job is going to get harder and harder moving forward, in my opinion. So, Travaris Banks, like I said, Otis Reese type strong safety prospect. Andy Jaffe is the free safety type prospect. This is a true strong safety type prospect. And the difference, everybody knows what Otis Reese did at Ole Miss, and we're all thankful for that. But, he was a top 100 player, so it's not apples to apples exactly. More of a stylistic type comparison. So, whenever you look at him as a true prospect of what could happen, and, whenever you look at that strong safety position, and you can see how the defense is being built. Ole Miss has a 3-deep at cornerback right now that has played Division I football. That's not arguable. Nobody tell people they don't have people that can play the position. You might not have top end guys if DeAndre Prince doesn't do his thing or one or two of the players don't work out. But experience and people that have played cornerback at the D1 level, you got that. Safety, like I said, that's the whole. That's what we're looking at. That's why Traveris Banks is such an important get. When you have at linebacker, you have Suntarian Perkins, who is getting ready. He's, according to Pete Colding, he's the best high school linebacker out of last year's class in America. He has never stepped on a football field in his life where he is not the best player on it. Now, as a true freshman, he might for the first time. It depends on how he reacts to that. Sometimes superstars and star players can struggle with that. But as somebody that's talked to Suntarian a little bit and seen exactly what he does, I do not expect that to be a problem in any way with Suntarian Perkins. This is a top shelf, amazing type kid. And then you have linebackers. Ashante Seastrunk is like the second or third highest rated linebacker returning, or highest graded linebacker returning in the SEC. And then you have Monty Montgomery. You have Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste. You have those guys. You have Suntarian Perkins. You have all the young guys that are coming up as well. The linebackers, the fact that they're not recruiting linebackers in the transfer portal should tell you all you need to know. Everybody might look at it and say, well, they need one more. Well, they don't think they need one more. And I think we should listen to them on that. They're the ones that Lane Kiffin gets paid $9 million to determine if Ole Miss needs to recruit a linebacker. If he thinks he's fine, I'm prepared to ride with him as well. Defensive line, they did a fantastic job. Akella Stone, Stephon Wynn, Isaac Ukwu. Players all on the front. They've too deep that defensive line. So I don't know exactly what their ceiling will be, but I guarantee you they'll flash. And when you look at what this team has offensively, the defense just needs to, at least in the beginning, steal some possessions for the offense. If you do that, you're going to be fine. And then you can recruit players like Travaris Banks, like Andy Jaffe. And you can fill them in and make the defensive backfield look the way you want it to look. And I really, really like this player. But first, I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com today to join. Do not use your no-sweat first bet on the Detroit Tigers. Just don't. I love the Tigers. I've been a lifelong Detroit Tigers fan for the last 3 months. And if you want to know how that journey's going, check out the YouTube page. I've got like 2 or 3 videos on that. And at the end of this month, we're going to add another one as well. But do not bet on that one. You take your bet another area with that, because even if you win your bet, which is, I just don't know about that. Just save your time and money, and don't bet on the Detroit Tigers at this moment. But don't miss your first chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks are used with permission. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. I do want to let you know that NBA's draft show is coming up, and don't miss it. It's the Locked On NBA Draft Live on Thursday night. Pick-by-pick analysis from our stable of local NBA hosts, national reaction from our NBA Big Board host, and live check-ins from inside the NBA Draft. Locked On NBA Draft Live, starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On NBA YouTube channel. Always do stuff like this. This is the type of stuff that Locked On does very well. And check that out. If you saw our schedule release that we did last week, Locked On, just fantastic with this type stuff. Anyway, let's get into the highlights a little bit on Traveris Banks. He's an alley safety. He's a good player. But the important thing to remember about him is his physicality. The one thing you look whenever he's on there, just the kickoff coverage, he's unselfish. He does what he needs to do. But look at what he hits. Even this case, it's even an accidental type situation where he kind of gets blocked into the receiver. But look how he's able to come off of that block and be physical with the contact, even though he's probably a little bit off balance. We talked about him being an alley type player. He's really good coming off the line. He would be a good box safety if we were still running what they did last year. His size, his length, he has a chance to be a Jacob Springer type player. But his athleticism coming off the ball, he's really good in the run game. You can see exactly why I compared him to Otis Reese. Also, by the way, those uniforms, put a navy blue helmet on them. You look pretty familiar, guys. But he's a genuine good player that just plays very well against the run. Very athletic. You can see why I compare him stylistically, probably not talent-wise, because talent-wise, Suntarian is off the chart, but he's stylistically a similar type player against the run, an athletic guy. And you can see Ole Miss is kind of developing a type that they're recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. Again, against the run, outstanding player outside. He's really good at reading the situation. Now, the question that this player is going to have into the early part of his high school year is his ball skills. And this is one thing that people need to pay attention to as well. His ball skills are okay, but I don't like his interception total his junior year. He needs to develop that through his senior year of high school and into his freshman year in college, because he's got 6 breakups, but he doesn't talk about interceptions. And then that I want to see an interception. I want to see a D1 athlete be the best player on the field. In the run game, he absolutely flashes, absolutely pops. But against the pass game, he can get a little suspect. Honestly, a little like Ladarius Tennyson, kind of the same, similar type situation with him. The question is, can he close the hole in his game? If he can do that, he will be absolutely fine and somebody that Ole Miss can absolutely count on moving forward. As you can see here, though, he's played some cornerback. They play him all over the field because he's the best athlete probably on the team. I mean, you see stuff. He did a good job covering. It's just attacking the football is something that he needs to work on. And this isn't something that I think it's a problem with him. I don't think it's a negative with him. It probably is a situation to where it's the difference between being a top 100 player and being a 175 player. Whenever people watch this video, like at Rivals or 247 or something like that, those ball skills are probably what's jumping off the page to him. Offensively, he's just a super athlete type player. He is somebody that you can honestly count on at the running back position. Again, he's one of the best athletes on the team, and is somebody that, I mean, he's going to do all right moving forward. But that's Travaris Banks recruiting high school. He, like on HUDL, his height and weight is 6'2", 190. Obviously on 3, it was like 6'1.5", 185 or something like that. We'll see. It's always a situation where those heights and weights do not match, but it kind of is. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk about how, I don't know, disappointed maybe is that the right word? I think the Egg Bowl rivalry and recruiting, people are going to hype it up, obviously, but it's kind of dead. And I'll explain when we come back. Stick around. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every day is tomorrow on the show. We will continue as we march towards SEC Media Days, talking about the stories of the day and whatever news kind of pops up as well. Should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to storylines. Hop in the comment sections if you have any suggestions. Honestly, if you have any questions. If I find something that pops up, I'll get it answered as well, even in the course of doing a regular show. I don't want to do a mailbag show quite yet, but eventually I will do a mailbag show as well. Subtext community, they are the ones that get the mailbag love as well. I'll ask for mailbag stuff on the subtext. Join the subtext community. The link is in the description. They're able to ask questions for our mailbag shows. I think we've done that once or twice. They also get exclusive recruiting news, like the stuff about Austin Simmons. We brought that up in that platform. Also, they'll get exclusive videos from time to time once the subscriber numbers go up, and honestly, they demand it. So check them out as well. Anyway, in this What You Talking About Willis segment, we talk about how the Egg Bowl recruiting rivalry is kind of dead at the moment. And I don't know if it's any fault of Ole Miss. I don't know if it's any fault of Mississippi State. I think it's the fault of the changing landscape of college athletics is the reason that the recruiting rivalry isn't what it was. Now, an example of that. There's been two big head-to-head rivalries that State has won recently that they've crowed about. One was for a 3-star defensive lineman in the late signing day in February that popped up out of nowhere. Ole Miss needed a defensive lineman, good player. I think he's from Monticello, Mississippi. State got him, low 3-star type player. The second one is they flipped an Ole Miss commitment from Fat Clark from Winona. Again, a low 3-star player. These are not NIL athletes. They're probably getting something, but they're not getting enough to where it matters. Whenever you get to the point where that number actually matters, Mississippi State is having trouble because this is what I think is going on down there. Their NIL is not at the level of what Ole Miss is. They're still at the point where they are having to maintain their own roster and prevent players from leaving, like Ra Thomas, who went to Georgia, prevent players from leaving off of their own roster, and by the time it's done, the NIL money is essentially gone. Now, this is a situation where Mississippi State is a school that has honestly made their bones inside the state of Mississippi being not the rich school. That's part of their identity since the beginning, is not being the doctor and lawyer school up the road. It is a school that is not as wealthy as the Ole Miss alumni base. This isn't an insult. This is a fact. And because of that, NIL is going to be a problem. And I think there's a possibility of Mississippi State becoming Vanderbilt without the degree. And whenever I say that, I said what I said. And they have serious problems. Now, they can probably fix it in the short term. I don't know if they can long term match what Ole Miss can in the NIL space. And as we all know, that recruiting right now has become an NIL game. It just has. It's become the gatekeeper. The stuff that Mississippi State was able to do under the table and through relationships, and I don't know, who was it? Steve Robertson or Gene Swindle sitting at Robert Elliott's house, like serving as an offensive line from that family from opposing college coaches. Tommy Kelly, Ramada, all these crazy petty stories that Mississippi State had been using over the past 30 years to get some of the larger name players. Remember the Jeffrey Simmons stuff where Ole Miss thought it was in the bag until he actually signed. Whenever stuff like that happens, that weird stuff, that petty stuff, I don't know if that stuff is able to exist anymore, at least in the NIL space. You can probably still have some of that stuff with lower ranked 3 stars that NIL isn't the story. But for the NIL kids, it's going to be difficult for them to compete. Now, will they get 1 or 2? Probably. They just always seem to. But is it a situation to where you can just look at the top 10 of the state and just pick out the NIL battles? We did a show 2 weeks ago listing out the on-3 consensus in the first place that Mississippi State showed up on it. And I think that was number like 14 or 15 in the state was the first place that Mississippi State showed up on it. That's an NIL problem. That's not a Mississippi State problem. That's not a Zach Arnett problem. That's not a relationship problem. If all those things were what they were, there are kids inside the state of Mississippi that do not want to go to Ole Miss. Ole Miss is not their preference. They grew up a Mississippi State fan. But Mississippi State does not have the NIL to get them in at the moment. You can't get to the point where those relationships matter because the gatekeeper doesn't allow it to happen. I think there's a player from Meridian that's a top 10, top 5 type player that I think is a Mississippi State guy. He's eliminated Ole Miss from the beginning. Ole Miss has not showed up on his list almost at all. And at the beginning, it was Alabama and Mississippi State, as you would expect, popping up on there. But then a couple weeks later, Mississippi State fell off, and now it's like South Carolina and Alabama. For a player that Mississippi State was getting, a player that they were getting. Heck, they got Isaac Smith last year before this influx of NIL money to Ole Miss. So you got to get past that gatekeeper. And right now, Mississippi State can't do that. And if you can't do that, there's not a chance for this crazy stuff to happen. The Tommy Kellys and all the stuff that we're always talking about. The sites fighting with each other about which coaching staff told them the correct information about where the kid's going. Because you never know which school the kid is telling the truth to and who the kid is lying to. Because 17-year-old kids have trouble saying no to coaching staffs that are just putting you on a pedestal, to making to where recruiting, and they're recruiting you in a way that is fun. That's when this recruiting service can get wacky. Now, with this NIL gatekeeper, especially the high-end prospects in the state of Mississippi, it's advantage Ole Miss on nearly every one of them, unless they're just a kid that didn't like Ole Miss growing up. What we saw happen with Travaris Banks was this, and I'm going to put this up as well. On 247, they were listed as 9 confident Mississippi State lean. That was the crystal ball, the projection. Those were 2 Mississippi State riders. It was a situation real similarly set up to what we're used to with Egg Bowl recruiting. So I honestly got excited. It's like, this could happen. You look on the on-3 side, it's Ole Miss and Tennessee and Alabama. There's not a Mississippi on there of the recruit prediction machine going up, down. That's like Zach Berry did it, Sam Spiegelman did it, but also like articles over there. Mississippi State wasn't showing up on the other site, Supreme Confidence. So what we're seeing right now is kids not wanting to tell Mississippi State no. They might be nice, they might be having fun. Obviously, you're in a situation to where you like the coach, but the gatekeeper does not allow it to happen. Mississippi State is not in the game for these major recruits because they don't have the money for it. I don't want to call them broke, but yeah, that NIL is becoming such an important piece. And what has happened, whenever they jumped all over this, and you remember when the guy from WCBI did the thing with Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss started the campaign, raised like $10 million to keep Lane Kiffin, built up the NIL war chest. All that Mississippi State saw was the fact that Ole Miss almost lost their coach. That's all they counted on. All they wanted to do is own the Rebels in that situation. And them talking about Lane Kiffin and all of this over and over again distracted them from the fact that Ole Miss now had a war chest comparable with the Auburns and the LSUs in the conference, to where they can get past the gatekeepers, to where they are a legit player in the NIL space, at least for 2024. Mississippi State did not know that. They did not balance it. They did not raise the money that they thought they would need. Now, I assume after this happened, and you look at the rankings of the state of Mississippi, they are trying desperately to raise money, and you're probably going to find some donor that just drops a couple of $1 million to help the NIL fund with Mississippi State. But you don't have something sustainable like you have built with the Grove Collective. I think that is important to know. Walker Jones has done a fantastic job with the collective. I've spoken with people that are connected to other schools in the Southeastern Conference, and they let me know that other schools respect what the Grove Collective has done. I'm going to be honest, until today, looking it up, I did not know what the Bulldog Collective was even called. And that's called, I think, the Bulldog Initiative. That is the battleground that's going on right now. Mississippi State just realized that that is the battleground. So you're going to see them desperately trying to raise money to get competitive so they can get in the game with somebody like Braylon Burnside, J.J. Harrell. That you're hearing things over and over again that relationship-wise, it might be pretty good, but that gatekeeper is always going to be in the way. You have to get at the point where you can at least get close enough to the NIL number that relationships even matter. As you know, the board says back there, it is what it is. And that is just an interesting space. And that is what I'm talking about today. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every day or tomorrow on the show, we will continue working towards SEC Media Days. Under a month to go. Very excited. Put in my credential stuff today to get on the FTP as well. So tune into tomorrow's episode as we continue to move towards that goal and any recruiting topics that pop up as well. Anyway, I hope everybody has a good day. I hope everybody has a nice Tuesday, but we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.